Hey nerds, how you doing? Happy Wednesday. Hope all is well in your neck of the woods. I'm doing a video tonight. Actually, I was kind of inspired by one of the comments on my last video. Richie Grayson said, well, he complimented my last vlog, which thank you very much. I Oh, by the way, I'm Matthew Keel. I'm bad at this. Goofy half and more disorganized half of NGR Radio. Hey, hope you've been here before, but if you haven't, welcome. Um, anyway, Richie Grayson complimented my last vlog. Thank you, Richie Grayson. Also, he said, I hear you like Helldivers. What's up? Well, the short story is yes. Yes. My name is Matthew Keel, and I like Helldivers, and I don't want to change. I don't think I have a problem, and I don't really want to stop. This game came out early last year, and it's by Arrowhead Games, and it's a lot of people called it top-down Destiny, and I'm doing this vlog because I was kind of inspired to just do a why I like Helldivers type of situation. So I'm gonna do that. Anyway, when this game came out, it was actually part of like PlayStation's spring 2016 or 2015 sale, like whatever they call that. I don't remember. Anyway, it was the first one in that series of sales that they had, and it's by Arrowhead Games. I don't remember what country they're from. I think they're Scandinavian. You all have Google. I'm doing a video right now, so I can't Google it. And as if you haven't watched one of these before, not really a fan on preparing and writing. You know, I try and just make these as off the cuff as I can. So whether that makes me look stupid or not, or for better or for worse, that's just how we're doing it. It is a isometric pseudo twin stick shooter. I say pseudo because generally in twin stick shooters you have one stick for direction and movement, and the other stick for firing. Now, in Helldivers, mechanically, I'm just going to go into that first. Mechanically, it's one stick for moving around, and you can press in to sort of sprint on the left stick on the PS4 controller. It is now available on PC, but I don't have a PC capable of playing it, or maybe I do and just don't. But I have a Mac, so I just choose not to game on it because I feel like that would be more of a headache than I need. But one stick runs, or the left stick runs and moves around. You press in and you can sprint. The right stick aims your weapon. Now, I say weapon because it could be a gun. It could be any number of types of things. They've actually released several expansions on Helldivers that are really interesting. Weapon-wise, they did release, they did come up with the idea of raid bosses for it. I'll get into that in a little bit later. I'll get into all that a little bit later. But the right trigger is what fire, or what is it? And I'm misremembering. Anyway, there's another button to fire, and then the really cool thing about Helldivers for me is the amount of chaos that it generates. It generates chaos in a special way. Now, and I say that going into this next part. Every time you boot up Helldivers, you're brought into this sort of galactic map. It's a giant circle, but in the center is Super Earth. I'll explain more on that in the quote-unquote story part, even though there's really not much of a story in Helldivers. In the middle is Super Earth because why not? And it extends in three directions. One direction, and it's one direction per species of alien or enemy. One direction is for the bugs, one direction is for the cyborgs, and one direction is for the Illuminates. Bugs are basically bugs. Cyborgs are cyborgs, but there's way more robot than human, unless there's some weird definition of cyborg that I don't know. The Illuminates are an interesting enemy type because they deal a lot with tech. Their most of their attacks aren't, guns per se, whereas the cyborgs are, and the bugs, they just attack you themselves. But they had like the enemy types in this game are different enough to where, like, they're similar enough to where, each of them has like a set tier, and with each tier it increases, it increases the necessity for you to think when you fight them. And all of them are different enough to where you have to actually think about what you're bringing to each enemy to sort of take them down. Now, the chaos is generated in an interesting way in Helldivers. Each time you go into, I'm repeating myself, I realize this, but it kind of necessitates that. You go into the galactic map, you see all three species, if they're even available, and how many systems within each species has been taken down. Once you get to the edge of the circle, you reach the quote-unquote home world of said species. Now, if you're not at the home world, each system has 12 planets. The reason is that is your leveling system. The top is, or the first planet is literally called a dive in the park. Helldivers and that is the easiest, because dive in the park, walk in the park, think about it. And then the 12th is called, quote unquote, with really no surprise, it's called a hell dive. That is where, a dive in the park, you're facing all of the lowest tier enemies only. There's only a few samples for you to get, and there's probably one, or if you're lucky, two objectives to complete. And there's really no, there's not really any other progression in terms of mission to mission gameplay. You don't have to do a 1, then a 2, then a 3, then a 4, because every time you knock off a planet, which each planet is probably 1 or 2 missions, each mission containing a set number of objectives varying on the level you choose. Once you knock out the lowest tier, another one pops up, and it's all randomly generated. It's all procedural, and it's basically endless. Now, I say basically because as you go into the galactic mapper and you pick a system, you'll see a meter in the top right as you're looking at the system, and it's usually part of it is yellow and part of it is, part of it is like burgundy or maroon. All that is the quote unquote public's effect on that system. So everything is persistent. It's not necessarily shared, but everybody's successes and failures affects that meter. Now, does that affect you personally? Not really. And the more you do, the more you realize it doesn't feel like you're affecting it that much. However, when you watch, if you're on like a decent level planet, like say 7 or above, and you do 3 missions flawlessly, where you're getting, 5, 6 objectives. Samples really don't play into it at that point. But if you're doing that and you see, like, you'll get like, if you do each mission 3 stars, you're getting 9 points of influence and a lot of experience, to where that feeds into that meter, and you actually see the dial move, and your half of the meter, if it moves and eclipses, everybody has conquered that system and they move closer to that species homeworld. That's sort of the grand scheme of Helldivers. Just conquer galaxy after galaxy after galaxy. And in a way, it's kind of one of the more generic objectives in all of video games. But the player interaction with it is where everything happens. Like, let's say you just have and you're playing Helldivers for the first time, and you say, okay, I don't want to do a dive in the park because I don't want to play on easy mode. I'm not sure I'm ready for a hell dive, so I'm going to try and aim at something in the middle, and I don't want to go too hard because it's, my first time. I'm going to aim at like a level 3 planet or a level 4 planet. That's fine, because you will, at this point, you will have gone through the tutorial, which is actually relatively easy and relatively intuitive, and it teaches you all the mechanics, and you sort of get the humor of Helldivers, and you just decide, okay, I'm going to start doing missions. Okay, so you're going in by yourself. If you leave your game open to the public, randoms can join you. Now, the thing about randoms, that adds, another variable to the equation, because you drop into a mission on Helldivers, there are already enemies that want to kill you. If you hit L2, the trigger on the PS4 controller, and you drop a grenade, don't stand too close to it, because as Call of Duty has taught us, you stand too close to your own grenade, you blow up. Well, that's no exception here. But let's say this random guy drops in and decides he's going to play with you. You're like, right, fine, I'm going to let this rando come in, and we're just going to start killing enemies and conquering objectives. And all of a sudden, like, let's pretend you're here, rando's here, and enemies spawn here. Rando sees them first, turns, fires, you die because friendly fire, and and you're understandably frustrated with that guy that basically turned and shot you. Now, change it up just a tiny bit to where rando is one of your buddies, and you know him, and you're in a party chat. All of a sudden, it can be frustrating if you really take it seriously, but if you take video games as they are, which is an intent on being fun, you actually get plenty of laughs as a result. And I'm not talking about, okay, the first time you and your buddy spawn into a world, he shoots you. That's not instantly hilarious. However, it becomes hilarious when you get moving along on a planet and you say, oh, I need to call down some ammo, and you type in the little D-pad code to call in some ammo, and you see light form on the screen. Like, you see you throw a little, we'll call it a Pokeball just because I don't have any other reference. You throw that, and then you see light emanate out of that, like it's signaling to the sky. Next thing you know, boom, pod full of ammo drops down so you can pick it up. Well, let's say you're a little distracted by enemies that are already, coming around, and you get in the way of said ammo. That lands on you, you die. Now, you can either choose to be really angry about that, or you can understand, like, oh, I should have been paying attention. Or let's say you're calling in your friend because he has died, because that's how you do it. If there's 2 players, there's unlimited lives, and that's just because once both players have actually been killed, and they're both done and one's not being called in, that's when it's over. So let's say you are like Moose, Cluel, and I, and we both enjoy a drink when we're hell diving, and and let's just say alcohol is not a performance enhancing drug for hell divers. We get ourselves into some shenanigans, especially when we get into the higher level missions, because he'll call me in and I'll land on him, or I'll call him in, he'll land on me, or one of us will call in one of our weapons and it'll land on each other, or any number of things. So basically, Helldivers is one of the games where anything can kill you. And just to add a little morsel of chaos, in that at the end of each mission, regardless of difficulty, you have to get to what's called the extraction point. And at the extraction point, you dial in your little D-pad code. Our buddy Gideon calls it the Konami code, which we've just never really we always call it that too, because we're old and we know how funny that is. So you do that, and then you have to basically sort of defend that point for like 90 seconds and not die while you wait for the extraction shuttle to land and pick you guys up. Well, if that lands on you, guess what? You die. Just as if any shuttle landed on you in real life, you'd probably not survive. But Penny Arcade, when Helldivers came out, did a relatively... Well, actually, I mean, I still laugh at it because I think it's funny. They did a comic about the dropship pilot in Helldivers. They call him Frank, and it's a new Helldiver asking, why is there blood all over the bottom of the shuttle? And he's just like, well, that's because Frank can't see too well, and he doesn't really care. So, it happens. And then that's when the guy realizes, oh, those are dead Helldivers. It's kind of dark and morbid, but I still chuckle at it. And then now to what do you do in Helldivers? Now I've said things like, oh, you go to planets, achieve objectives and leave. The types of objectives vary from planet to planet. Well, they vary from planet to planet, species to species, and difficulty to difficulty. Now, some of it could be, there are capture points where you just basically have to defend it from enemies for a certain amount of time. You have to keep enemies out of a certain radius in that, as the meter fills up, so you can, call that area captured. It's a relatively thin premise, but it provides, at the higher difficulty levels, it provides some pretty intense gameplay. There are also just defense operations where you have to go to this missile silo, activate the missile silo, and then defend the missile for like a minute or so until it actually fires. Or you have to set up things, like there will be giant boxes on the field where you have to basically open them up, and that's it's some sort of communication device where it communicates with, I'm assuming, Super Earth or Galactic Command or whatever. Then there are escort missions, which you can escort. The three types of escort missions are train, where there's these tracks that run along the surface, and you have to defend the train from enemies. And if anything gets steps on the track in front of the train stops. It's one of the only things that doesn't really kill you. But it leaves it open for attack if anything is on the track. So you have to kind of think of all this. You have to think about this on your feet the entire time while maintaining, other little nuances that pop up in the game. There are also, you have to escort survivors of crashed ships to a certain base. This tends to be one of the more, this is probably the more expendable of them, or the more, I don't want to say genuinely expendable missions, but it's one of the ones that, like, along with like the missile silo defense, and the train defense as well, where people will, if you're on like a hell dive and you have to do that, if you get overrun, it's probably better if you just leave, because that objective will distract the enemies. But you kind of have to make that decision as you play. It's not something that you could say, oh, we're just going to sacrifice that, because as Gideon always says, at least fucking attempt. Glad I worked that in. And then there's also suitcase missions where one person has to carry the suitcase, and they can only use their sidearm while they're carrying the suitcase. And they can't sprint while they're carrying the suitcase. So everyone else kind of has to protect them until they get to the base, drop off the loot, and then the objective is complete. Now, how does one level up in Helldivers? You only level up by completing objectives. You can step on any planet in the game and you can kill 300 enemies, 400 enemies. Hell, kill 1,000 enemies a mission if you can. Killing enemies does not help you. Like, that's the one sort of thing that you, like, especially early on, you'd see a lot of people going, oh, it's just going to stay here and kill stuff. That's cool, but the only thing that really does is help you towards a trophy. It does not help you in the game at all. You don't level up by doing it. I think a lot of people, I think there's a certain logic to video games, or at least a logic that people think exists in video games, where the more you kill, the better you're doing. In Helldivers, you can, if the more stealthy you can remain, the easier a mission is. And it's difficult to remain stealthy because the smallest enemies of any species are the scouts, and they usually show up at the periphery of a screen and basically send up their little signals. But you have like 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes. You have about 3 seconds before they get their signal. So if you see them and you can kill them in 3 seconds, you're still dark, which is good. Now, and within each species, enemies range from like your scout all the way up to giant tanks. And I say giant tanks because there are some things that you could sit there and just unload bullet after bullet after bullet into the tanks. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, if you don't have an anti-tank weapon, you're not going to hurt them, which is strategy. Which is where I will lead into next. The strategy in Helldivers is it's very fluid. It's going to change from mission to mission. It's going to change from species to species, like I mentioned earlier. But the moment-to-moment strategy is something you have to think of, because you can't just all let's pretend you all land in this little spot right here. You guys can't go in 4 directions and everybody just says, oh, if I need help, provide reinforcements. You can go to the limits of the screen. Now, the screen will move because the planets are actually pretty sizable. They're not No Man's Sky size, or nor do they pretend to be Destiny sized. But you have to move around on them, and you have to sort of move as a unit. One can't just walk off that way while everybody else goes that way. And the closer everybody is to the edge of the screen, you don't know what's beyond it, because there could be enemies coming. They could spawn literally right outside the boundaries of the frame that you see. And if one of you is over here and the other 3 are at this side, and a tank spawns, kills everybody, this guy doesn't know what happened. Nobody saw what killed them. So you kind of have to sort of stay in the middle of the screen and move as a unit. And you have to sort of understand and respect the limitations of the screen, which is, I've never really I don't think even in the fact that I've been playing this for a year and like 7 months now, I've never thought about it in terms of that. In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, it reminds me of an old Japanese filmmaker, and these movies have nothing to do with Helldivers, but the principles that his name is Yasujiro Ozu, and the way he used frames in his movies is very kind. Me explaining that part of Helldivers made me think of how he did that. They're very not related, so don't say, oh, if I like Helldivers, I'll like an Ozu movie, because chances are you probably won't. Or maybe you will, and you're as weird as I am, and we'll get along. Cool. But you have to sort of give yourself a certain distance so you can protect your team, and also not wander off, because it's dangerous to go alone, like Zelda always said, or The Legend of Zelda. She didn't say that, the game did. That dude in that cave. I'm old. And then strategy at the individual level is an easy thing. I mean, there are certain ways that like I play, so I know what I'm going to bring just about every time out, because I've gotten to the point where I don't need research samples anymore. I don't need to like level up any specific weapons, which is done by research sample. I don't need to do anything for trophies anymore, because I've gotten them all. And I kind of know how I'm going to play on mission, whether or not I want to do it solo, or whether or not I've got another three people with me, or even another 2 or 1. But let's pretend for a moment anybody watching this goes to Helldivers and says, I got 3 of my friends to buy it because they listen to me and they're impressionable, and now we're going to play Helldivers. Well, always try and think of who's good at what, and always remember that no matter how many players you have, each person can only bring 4 things. Now, it doesn't have to be 4 different things either. If you have a mech, you can bring if you have the mech unlocked, you can bring 4 mechs and just roll with I guess what looks like an AT-AT from Star Wars. Or if you want to just bring 4 things of ammo, you can do that. Now, this part of it is called stratagems. Now, there are 3 types of stratagems. One is defensive, which are in green in the menu, and those are literally that. Like they have turrets, they have barbed wire fences, they have minefields that you can have drop down. They have any number of things. They have distraction beacons, which are really cool if you can get them to work right. Because I've always had a little trouble with it, and I got to the point where I never really wanted to figure out why. I just changed the way I play whenever I couldn't figure out something else. I just like, okay, I'm just not going to play with that anymore. There's this thing called the Humble Bee, I believe, where if you upgrade it fully, or even, I mean, starting even at the base level, you throw it up, it basically hovers over you on the screen, and it lets you know where samples are. If you are in a mission where there's an objective highlighted in yellow with a dotted line circle around it, that means that the objective is within the area of that dotted line circle on the map, but you have to find it. They don't know exactly where it is. Well, the Humble Bee, I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, you can use to find those objectives. And there are other ones that are varying degrees of good and bad. I've played with enough randoms who use things in different ways that there's any number of combinations that things can be used in, and you can find ways to be effective. The offensive stratagems are are in red, and that is, you can, if you've ever seen Apocalypse Now, where they drop napalm on that beach, there's a napalm drop like that where it's just a wall of fire. It basically, let's say you're here and you throw it this way, the wall is going to be perpendicular to the path of the throw. So if it's this way, it's this way. If it's that way, it's that way. If it's that way, it's that way. And yes, that can kill you too. There's also, airstrikes, there's barrages, there are static fields, which work really well on illuminates. And there's so much in this game. It's insane. And the blue stratagems, I guess we'll call them resources or resupplies, where there's other weapons you can use. Like there's a flamethrower, there's a poison one, there's a missile launcher, which is called a recoilless rifle, but it fires missiles. It's an anti-tank. It's really good. And the little thing there is it's both a rifle and a pack of ammunition. One person can do that, but it takes forever to load that gun. But if one person picks up the gun and the other person picks up the pack, all the person with the pack has to do is come reload the person with the gun, and it takes like half a second. And you learn these things. There's also calling down ammo. There's a rocket launcher called an obliterator that fires rockets at an arc. Moose is really good with that, and he's found a way to ensure he hits almost every time, which is really cool. But with each thing, it's not just cut and dry. You kind of have to play with it and learn it. And most of that right there is kind of what has kept me coming back. Not to mention, if you have a fun group of friends that can just get up to some dumb shenanigans, it's a good time. Like some of my best gaming memories of the past 2 years have been playing with Matt Phillips, Moose Kluel, and Gideon, and just getting up to something stupid. I remember one of the things where Matt Phillips and I really became friends was there is a jetpack in the game, and jetpacks in any game are kind of awesome. But this isn't really a jetpack in the, hey, I can propel myself off the ground and fly around. It's just a giant jump. So you just jump at an arc. You can jump over certain environments if they're not too tall, or if they're not too big in terms of wide around. And you can jump over tank enemies when they're charging at you, and you can use it in very, very cool ways to get yourself out of trouble. And I do believe I had a jetpack. Matt Phillips believed I stole it from him, which I didn't. The reason I say I didn't, because we know who did it. It was Justin Doss, because Justin Doss admitted it at the time. But Matt Phillips still shot me in the back of the head with a bazooka, because he's just like, well, I just had to do it at that point. And it was the right kind of hilarious, where all of us cracked up laughing. Nobody watching this video is going to laugh at that, because the chemistry of the situation wasn't there. I could say you had to be there, but you could still be there and think we were just dumb. And we probably were, but it was fun for us. Then we come to the perk system. I'm pretty sure I can equate perks to perks in any first-person shooter, almost, where different perks unlock at different levels. As I said before, you don't gain experience by killing things. You gain experience by clearing planets and completing objectives. you can complete every objective on the planet, fail the extraction, and still get the experience for it. So don't think that you have to extract every time out, because you don't. Sometimes it's you just shit happens and you die. But I don't remember the level of each perk at this point, but you can unlock a perk that's smoke grenades. That's the dumbest perk in the game. Don't use it because they don't work. There's a perk where you can sprint forever, where you never run out of stamina. There's a perk where your stratagems can cool down faster, because there are plenty of stratagems that you can use infinitely. You just have to wait for them to cool down. And there's also one where you have like I don't remember what it's called, but you get it at a super high level. Like I think you have to be at least level 20 to get it. But you see this halo around your head, and the minute you take death damage, like death level damage, you actually teleport away from being hit and you're still alive. So it's kind of like having a second life. Now you can let that recharge without, if you can not die for long enough for that to happen, it'll recharge and you can kind of keep going, which is a cool strategy. I always tend to use the sprint forever perk, because I find running away is a viable strategy depending on what kind of overrun you are. And I also think I run away a lot in Souls games, so I think it's just habit at this point. But yeah, so you gain perks you gain perks every few levels, and then like as you get into like the teens, you start earning them less and less, just because there's not a lot at that point. But I haven't used a whole lot of them, to be honest with you. I know there's one that if you're ever downed but not dead, you can tap X to heal yourself. And there's a perk, I think it's called syringe, or its logo is a syringe, where each time you hit X in that situation, you get more health, so it helps you heal faster. It's a good strategy, but I think it's more for if you're rolling by yourself a lot. Yeah, I feel like I've been talking a long time, but I'm still not done. And then what Arrowhead has sort of done since post-release, because if you just get the vanilla game, there's plenty to work with and plenty to play with and lots to do. Post-release, they actually added a new environment, which was called Volcanic, where it's a planet where there are spouts of lava or lava, however you want to say it, that periodically spurt up, and they can kill you. They're not afraid to just throw that in there, and you can use those to kill enemies too. But I wouldn't necessarily rely on that strategy too much. I mean, it's a happy accident when it does, but it can be implemented in several ways. They also added raid bosses. Now, raid bosses, you have to have a certain amount of influence within a species, not within a system, but within a species. And in order to get to the raid bosses, you just can't be at whatever species you're going for. You can't be at their home planet, because the raid boss will show up along the planetary line, but it'll be like below. It'll be like, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then like down here, you'll see a planet with a face on it, with an angry face, and you can go there. Now, there's only 3 raid bosses, or 3 different raid bosses. It's every time you go in a cyborg world, it's the same guy. Every time you go in Illuminate world, it's the same Illuminate boss, and it's the same bug boss as well. But the cool thing is, there are ways to. I'm not going to go into this here, but there's a way to defeat each of them, and it's very different for each of them, because they do what I know to be typical raid boss stuff, where their health is super high, and they're super strong in terms of taking damage, and they take a long time to fight, but I don't think they do require you have a team, and they do require you have a team of people that can work together. You can't just do it with randos. It does not work out. And I've tried, and with randos, never gotten close. Even if we all sort of knew what to do, we never got close. You have to sort of have an idea of who you're playing with, because you also kind of get a feel for where they're going to go on the battlefield almost innately. And I think those are, despite being the most pedantic to figure out, because they're not there's a pretty blatant key, and once you sort of hit on it and you guys figure out your rhythm, that's it. Like it's basically becomes time at that point. It's time for you to just chip the guy's health down and kill him. One of the things I really like about the game is, even if you're not at an enemy's or a species homeworld, at random occurrences there will be capital city troubles. Now, very much like the raid boss plants, how they appear below the planetary line in a system, the capital city, or the capital city assault, I guess is what they're called, they appear above. And with those, it's a one planet thing. It's 4 objectives. Usually, there's one that's relatively easy, one that's intermediate, one that's hard, and one that's a hell dive. And with each of those, like how I explained before about the meter for the planetary system, there's a meter for those as well. So you have to sort of basically keep doing missions over and over and over, and the missions are different every time. It's not the same mission, but you're going into it. If you go to the easy mission over and over and over, it'll be different easy missions rather than the same thing, which is another sort of interesting thing. It never really got boring for me. But there's a meter, and the harder missions you do, the more objectives you do, the more times you extract, things like that, the more things you complete, the quicker that meter goes up for the super Earth side versus the species side. And I just want to interject here and say, I know I sound crazy, and I know that I'm probably, see me at this point, if you're still listening, I get it. You probably think I'm either in some sort of fever dream, or that maybe I should collect my thoughts better. The latter is probably correct, but you're not in a fever dream. This game really does have a lot in it. And I think, despite it being a top-down isometric sort of situation perspective, I think it's actually presented the right way, because like, think about Diablo. You have 4 people. You can use 4 of the same class or 4 of different classes, and for the most part, you're just like, if you're on PC, you're just clicking at enemies, using the hot bar to just watch all your abilities just blow stuff up. Well, I think Helldivers is a bit more interactive than even that. The only thing it's not is loot driven, which I think if that were loot driven, that might be a way to make it better. But I also think that the idea of having a very of saying these, like, if you unlock all the weapons, these are your tools, and you can use any combination of 4 of these tools to attack a planetary objective. And I think that Arrowhead sort of did this right in terms of balancing, the enemies versus the players. I think Diablo, while it's easy for someone to lob, well, Diablo just looks like Dynasty Warriors. Diablo Blizzard did not. I don't think they did a Dynasty Warriors thing. I think they did a Gauntlet thing better than the people that did Gauntlet. But they also balance those that you can't just walk into everything super confidently. The enemy, you can get overrun, you can die. And I think where Helldivers goes is they turn that chance of dying up to 11. So you have to sort of think on your feet a lot more than you do in Diablo. And I'm not using that as a pejorative towards Diablo, because Diablo is a very different game. But I think that there's an easy way. It's easy to get lumped into paralleling the two, but they're very different. They're very different. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is how Helldivers is presented. When it came out, I'm pretty sure this is because there was only the bugs to fight for I think its first month of release, or maybe more. And the easy thing to say was that it had a Star Troopers-esque story. Now, that's very correct, but very sort of misleading, because all you're thinking of is Paul Verhoeven see. So in order to protect that, you should join the Helldivers, become a legend. I mean, growing up in this country in the 80s, you saw, this is, they're basically leaning into that whole be all you can be from the Army. Now, I'm not saying joining the Army is bad or it's satire in any way, because those people are braver than me. They hear a calling louder than I hear it, and I think they're much more self-sacrificing than someone like me sitting in Philadelphia with first world problems talking about a video game at midnight on a Wednesday. I mean, be that as it may, but it was easy in the 80s for me to look at one of those self-serving be all you can be commercials talking about how amazing it is to be in the Army, or those Marines commercials where you see the guy fighting a dragon, but then he just turns into a Marine in the formal drill gear with the sword and the hat and just staring at the camera, looking all tough. And I think they just sort of see the humor in it. And I think it sort of points out at that humor without sort of denigrating that situation. But they don't really say this is why we're going after the bugs, this is why we're going after the Illuminates, this is why we're going after the cyborgs. You find that out if you really dig for it. It's kind of all MacGuffins and doesn't really matter, because most of the time when you go to the Encyclopedia of Enemies, they say well, the only good enemy is a dead enemy, right? Or they make reference to, how free they are, but at the same time, how much of a kind of a dictatorship that they live in, which is real weird. Um, and some of the best things are actually the in-game one-liners. You can talk in party chat, but if you're not in someone's party, there are ways to talk with, the D-pad. You can tell people to move. No, we're not going that way. Stop. Yes, no. I mean, it's there are usually, I think there are 2 or 3 commands per each thing, but each, like, if you press up on the D-pad, it means one thing. If you press right on the D-pad, it means another thing. But like, it's usually yes or no, and then move or stop. And the voice varies on that. And you can choose to be a female, you can choose to be a male, you can change whenever you want. My favorite is when you've killed a bunch of enemies, and your character shouts, "How about a nice cup of liberty?" I think that's one of the coolest things that has ever been said in a video game. Just to the point where I think it was Moose that pointed out that there was a coffee mug, very much in the vein of that Mega Man E coffee mug you see, where it says liberty on it, and I'm like, I want that. So if anybody watches this and knows where to get one of those, please comment and let me know, or just tell me to F off. I don't know. But the long story short, and I know that's impossible at this point, is this game is very, very, it's deeper than it looks on the face. And just like any game, if you are open to it, it can be fun. It's not photorealistic. It's not really leaning into trying to be real life. But it is very much it's very much a game, and it is a fun game. It on the show I do outside of NGR Radio, the Platinum Achievement Podcast, we were going to do a big Game of the Year 2015 series of interviews, all of which I did, but for reasons beyond my control, were never released. And when I had all our hosts, I basically interviewed all of them. I had someone interview me, talked about our games of the year. We were going to do a nice big, rollout of all these, because we really liked our community, and we wanted to show that we care about them just as much as we like doing our show. And the response I got for doing those interviews was really cool. It's my biggest regret since starting to do podcasting is that those still haven't gotten out. But my game of the year for 2015 was Helldivers, followed closely behind by Bloodborne. And my one metric for that is I think both of those games are fun, but they're fun in very different ways. Yes. But I've never had any sort of water cooler moments like the ones I had playing with the people I played Helldivers with. Rocket League was a very similar situation, but Rocket League for me was not as fun as Bloodborne or Helldivers, obviously. But if you are interested in trying out Helldivers, look for me on PS4, Infinite_Rewind. Comment on this video saying, if you've played it, whether or not you agree or disagree. What did I miss? I mean, I know I just sort of turn on the camera and just sort of go, but that's the way I like to do it. And if anybody wants to offer any other criticism, or this particular video was inspired by a comment. If there's anything you want me to talk about, please let me know. Otherwise I could just come in here and just ramble aimlessly. It's kind of what I do anyway. But anyway, yeah, Helldivers, my game of the year 2015. It's if I were to do a 2016 list, it's probably still high among the games I played in 2016 that did not come out in 2016. So it's fun, yo. It really is. And if you're interested in try it, hit me up on PS4, hit me up on Instagram, hit me up on Facebook, hit me up here on the DNA Network, youtube.com/the DNA Network. I know I said my PSN name, Infinite_Rewind, is basically where I am everywhere. I'm on Twitter, but I do not tweet. I basically, my pictures that I take for Instagram go to Twitter. Yeah. So that's what that is. But yeah, I'll play Helldivers with anybody. Just put that out there. And yeah, I think I've bored you guys enough. So for that, look for me on NGR every Monday. I've been on the Platinum Achievement podcast again a little bit of lately. I know we recorded this past Sunday. Chris edited the show on Monday. I'm not sure it's up yet, but it's coming. And look for me on all those places. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you dislike. Give me some direction. I kind of need it, I think. If any of you haven't listened to it, the new album from A Tribe Called Quest is amazing, and you should hear it. Very rarely do revered groups, not just hip hop, but like very rarely do revered groups come back and seem as vital as they were at their peak. Like, I mean, this is A Tribe Called Quest is basically hip hop's Mission of Burma or Dinosaur Jr. in the way that they came back. I'm not saying, I mean, I think they're more vital to hip hop than Mission of Burma or Dinosaur Jr. are to rock, but both of those bands were gone for a long time and they showed up again and they were themselves. They weren't just like, oh, we're going to put out an album so we can pay the rent so we don't have to get jobs, or we're going to go on tour just so you can pay us, because now that 20 years between us being relevant and now means all of our fans that made us relevant got adult jobs and have disposable income and can pay $150 for a ticket. No, Tribe Called Quest came back and they put some piss and vinegar into hip hop in a way that I think it probably kind of always needs. I don't think it has it all the time. That doesn't mean it's not good, because I love hip hop, but this is definitely different than anything you'll hear this year. And that difference is awesome. With that, I will say banana and I forgot to get the button again. Banana and out.